Well, this is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Yesterday, I'd said the unofficial, two elders at this church, the unofficial elder, sent me this, and it reminded me of what had happened to me when I was a teenager and how we had spent a year when I was in high school. Last year I was in high school preparing for an examination that we had to pass in order to graduate from high school. It was the law where I went to school. And that was a test on the Constitution of the United States. And we did that. Spent a year, had a fellow that taught us. He was a basketball player from the he had been a basketball player from the University of Evansville, Indiana. Evansville U, I think they call it. And he's a great big, tall, red-headed fella named Steve Britt, B-R-I-T. And he had a way about him just to make it relaxing. And he taught the class, and it was enjoyable. And it wasn't a big school, so the folks who were in the class were the folks that I'd gone through school with. They knew my family, and I knew theirs, and their parents knew my parents, and my granddad and grandparents knew their grandparents, that kind of thing. And we discussed a lot of things as just young folk, and it drove some things home. Matter of fact, I say, and I don't say it lightly, I learned more about the Constitution of the United States preparing for that senior examination to get out of high school than I learned in law school. I don't say that in passing. Well, why is that? Well, I'll tell you why that is. Because in law school, you don't have a lot of time. You got 3 short years, that's pretty short. All you do is get introduced, really, in law school to fundamental concepts. You learn a new dialect called law French, but it's kind of scattered, but you learn it, what the words mean, estoppel, and all those kind of words. And you read a lot of cases. Why do you do that? Because they're training you to be lawyers. They're not training you to be legislators. There are 3 branches of government. Now, this is in the Bible, friends. It's also our common law tradition. I want to read some of this. This started yesterday. I said that reminded me of what we'd gone through when I was in high school. We got to question 12 of the Catechism on the Constitution, written by Arthur J. Stansbury, a preacher, by the way, Arthur Stansbury, duly ordained, a knowledgeable, learned man, Arthur Stansbury, 1828, published the same year as Webster's Dictionary of the English Tongue. Catechism, the method that the Bible talks about, teaching people. 333 questions, 333 answers on the Constitution of the United States. Which of these ways of governing a nation is best? That's number 13. Let's go to 12, which we finished yesterday. A state must be very small where all the people can meet in one assembly. If it is despotism, if it is anything but a common law government, a democracy, that's what they say the whole world is. You go to China, they'll tell you it's a democracy. They don't know what a democracy is. They don't care. It's despotism. And anytime somebody tells you there's a democracy, run for your life. It doesn't work. God does not ordain such things. What is the balance of the matter? Well, he says, which of these 3 ways is best? He talks about aristocracy. He talks about despotism. Which of these 3 ways of governing a nation is best? And he said the last, a country that is ruled is said to be free or to enjoy liberty, but where a single man may make what laws he pleases and all the rest must obey him, the people are no better than slaves. That's simple enough. But it needs to be taken a step further. All of the world is ruled not always by a single man, sometimes by a single woman, but all the world is ruled by a single will, other than the will of the maker of heaven and earth. Now, God has delegated government to men down here on land. And he said, I don't want you to govern by a single will of any men or combination of men. Well, what would be a single will by a combination of men? That would be rule by a legislature. But what do you call absolute or sovereign rule by a legislature? You call that a republic. We are not a republic. Somebody said in the chat yesterday, I'd said that yesterday, and they said, we are a republic, big capital letter. No, we're not. Common law government is not a republic. Let me repeat it again. A republic is where a country is ruled by the single will of a legislature. All the men in the legislature combine their will into one, passing legislation that's absolutely sovereign. There's no interpretation of it. The courts aren't allowed to change it or interpret it or declare it unconstitutional. The president is not allowed to ignore it. No, everybody is under authority and power of a single will called the legislative will. You want that? That'd be worse than having we've learned this in America, that'd be worse than having a dictator of one man. Much worse. Pennsylvania tried it after we separated from Britain. I remember I started to say yesterday that movie with Mel Gibson, The Patriot, based upon a true story, but a lot of literary license in it. There was a fellow down in South Carolina like that. But in the state legislature, they were trying to decide whether the colonial legislature of South Carolina, trying to decide whether they wanted to separate from Britain. And he'd been through the French and Indian Wars. Martin, his name is Martin. By the way, that name Martin was taken from a man from Connecticut who was very famous, J.P. Martin, who wrote the only memoirs we have of a continental soldier, 7 years of service fighting Britain. As a young boy, started at 16. When he was old, he wrote the story called J.P. Martin, the memoirs of a continental soldier, the sufferings and the deprivations. Well, Martin was in the legislature, and he was again separating from Britain because he said, and he made the speech, you remember, some of you that saw it, he said, you've seen war in the French and Indian War, but this war will not be fought in a faraway place up in Canada or out in the wilderness. This war will be fought among us. And he said, I would much rather have George III, a single tyrant, 3,000 miles away, than a democratic kind of a setup here, which would be thousands of tyrants 3 miles away. I think that's the way he put it. Some of you may remember it better than me. But the point I'm making, trying to illustrate, is and by the way, at that time in England, it wasn't really George III. Well, it was, but in England, the tyrant was the Parliament. And Parliament was absolutely sovereign, except in the colonies. The king was dictator in the colonies. King in England. Common law king of limited power. But they had been foolish enough to move to a sovereign legislature, and they've never conclusively moved away from that. Parliament in England is still sovereign. That doesn't make for freedom. That is rule by a single will. And that's what Stansbury is saying here. A country that is ruled is said to be free, ruled properly. That's what he's saying. Liberty only occurs, freedom only occurs under law. If there is no law, there won't be any freedom, because dominators will dominate if they think they can get away with it. Question, why do men obey a despot? Why do men obey a legislature if they live in that kind of a ridiculous situation called a pure republic? Do we have a legislature? Yes, but our legislature is not final. What's final in America? The president? No, he's not final either. What about the Supreme Court? No, they're not final either. What's final? The jury is final in our common law tradition. And only in our common law tradition do we have a jury. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, except in the handful of common law countries in the world. That's why we're prosperous. Now, Britain is a fascinating situation, common law country. And even though they say sovereign, or a parliament is sovereign, once the crown hands sovereignty to parliament when they go into session, the crown is the keeper of sovereignty in England. But once that happens, they say parliament is sovereign. They say it, but it's not really true, because the courts in England have the power to overrule parliament. Yes, in individual instances. Juries have that power too. So even though they don't say it right, they're still a common law country. And that attitude, which is, people say, of course, we've said for a long time here in America, the Americans are more English than the English. Why? Because we're more of a common law country. We're more intense about it. We still have a grand jury. We require a grand jury for indictments. We don't just depend upon a prosecutor to bring charges. In the federal courts anyway, and many of the states, not all of them, but many of them. We're intensely a common law country. Why do they obey him when he is a tyrant? Because he has an army of soldiers whom he pays. He has an army of soldiers who he pays. He has police officers who get paid. He got ATF, FBI, CIA, IRS, and by the way, they're all packing heat, all of them. And they get paid. And their paychecks come regularly. Now, they don't even do paychecks anymore. They just put the money right in the account electronically. He pays them. They force the people to obedience. Here's a point I want to make. This is the evil empire. The evil empire runs on one thing. One thing. What is it? Money. The word for demon in the New Testament, the word translated demon in the New Testament, by the letters, its definition is distributor of wealth, distributor of goodies, sugar daddy. I get you to do what I want because I pay you. And increasingly, policemen, and I've even heard our military forces will do whatever they're paid to do. They're professionals. So they're paid, like actors and actresses. They take great pride in doing anything the script calls for. And as long as they get paid, they'll do it. Shucks, they might do it otherwise. And then, of course, the script calls for some really nasty things. They're nothing but horrors. No, I don't say that lightly. That's what they are. That's what they've always been called, and that's been accurate. Read about them. I was reading the other day, Miss Francine, about, no, I wasn't reading. Something popped up on YouTube. It was a whole presentation concerning the whorehouse on the inside the gate at MGM Studios. It was kept there for all the actors. And they had girls flocking in from all over the country by the hundreds of every day want to be movie stars. They'd put them to work right away. Right away. All the famous actors and actresses we think are wonderful people, that's the way they live. That's what they do. And it's always been that way. And just like armies that are professionals, and sailors that are professionals, they'll do whatever they're told to do because they're getting paid. And that is why, listen to me close, that is why at common law we have the doctrine called the militia. It's the same doctrine that's in the Bible. Those are consonant. The Bible is final. The militia, because they aren't professionals, they don't have careers to worry about. I talked to a man named Singlob. His last name was Singlob. I met him in Charleston, South Carolina. He was with General Westmoreland. General Westmoreland was the commander of all the troops in Southeast Asia at one time, all the military forces. He was with General Westmoreland. Singlob was a retired Army officer also. At that time, General Westmoreland, light was on, but nobody was home. He was older, and he was checking out. He spent all his time down at the battery. They call it the battery there on the shore of the harbor of South Carolina, the batteries where Beauregard began the bombardment of the Union fort out in the harbor. The man that commanded the Union fort out in the harbor was Anderson. Anderson had been an artillery instructor at West Point, and Beauregard had been one of his cadets. Beauregard was firing on Fort Sumter. A lot of military officers retire there. He'd wander around the battery. That's what Westmoreland was doing. Well, I met this fellow named Singlob, who was with General Westmoreland, just to be with him, to kind of help him during that day at this meeting where I was. General Singlob, he became a general too. Singlob, there's not many Singlobs around, by the way, kind of a funny name, but General Singlob was a short man with a flat top haircut, blonde-headed, ears kind of sticking out a little bit, small man, tough as nails. He's the one that led the first Americans into France before the invasion of Normandy to try to help organize the French underground, let them know what was going on. He was a young officer then. He also did the same thing during World War II in Asia. After he did that, then he went to Asia, and he actually parachuted into a lot of places behind the lines with a team of men to try to contact Japs that would listen to them and tell them, hey, the war's over. If you guys don't throw in the towel, you'll probably die. Very dangerous missions this man was sent on when he was young. He was the comic book kind of hero kind of guy, you know. Well, when he got older, kept going up in the ranks, and you leave the field rank. Major is the last field rank. Seldom are men out in the field fighting that are above major. We got up to be a general, and he was in charge of all the forces, the American forces in South Korea at one time. And I was on the other side of the ocean at that time when this happened, and I got to talking to him. I said, I didn't know who he was. He told me I was there, and I said, well, I was over there at that time. And I said, you were there when this, and this happened. He said, that's right. I said, I remember that. I didn't know, a young guy, I didn't know what was going on. You just do what you're told. I said, General Singlob, what happened? He said, well, Jimmy Carter, I told Jimmy Carter there was an incident in the DMZ and some Americans were killed. The North Koreans killed them. And I hunkered down. I put out the red alert. I said, we're ready for war. When you give us the signal, we're just ready. And he sent a message to the President of the United States, who was Jimmy Carter, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, by the way. That didn't mean nothing. It means a negative thing, as a matter of fact. Well, Singlob he was a Mustanger, kind of came up through the ranks as a young man. He didn't go to the academy. And he told the president, I'm on red alert. Because that's the commander-in-chief, right? And he was right under him there, kind of thing. And he said that Carter told him, take your boys off red alert. And he came back and said, I'm sorry, Mr. President. In good faith, I can't do that. We're in danger. People don't realize this. I don't think a lot do. I'm telling you. I just give you personal testimony. The United States and her interests are in danger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the world, and have been since we've been a country. And since World War II, it's been real intense. It never has ever stopped. The Cold War commenced, and the cat and mouse game has never stopped. Playing cat and mouse with the commies. We're still playing cat and mouse with the commies. I just read the other day, Miss Francine, that the armed forces of the United States are on an obscure island in the Pacific now, an island that had the largest air base during World War II that the Americans had. They're hacking away the jungle and uncovering the old runways and refurbishing them because they don't know what China's going to do. Well, I'm glad. I doubt if Joe Biden's saying anything about it. And I don't, lights on there, nobody's home with him either. Well, Singlob told Carter. Carter said no. And Singlob said, with all due respect, Mr. President, I can't do that. I'm speaking man to man to you. It would be a breach of my duty to do that. He said, if you don't do it, I'll fire you and ruin your career. He said, I won't do it. He said, okay, then you're fired. And his career was ruined. Got right at the top and boom, cut him off. Well, there are some that will say there's more to it than that. That he was speaking against the president before that happened. Well, he wasn't speaking against the president. He had never disobeyed an order before that. And he had never spoken against any order the president had ever given him. I went, after I found this out, then I'm older now, I wanted to research it and see what happened. And I went and looked it up and researched the whole thing. It was something I was familiar with as just an ignorant kid. But, well, I say a kid, I was a grown man. But I think back 10, 15 years, I know 10 times what I knew 10 years ago. I understand 10 times what I understood 10 years ago. That's no kidding. Maybe some of you have noticed this. As you get older, the understanding comes in waves. It accelerates so much that you know so much, you think, you come to so many good conclusions, you think, how could I ever tell somebody about this? And if I did tell them, they wouldn't believe me. Isn't that the way it works? Oh, yeah, but I'm just one more man. There's been a lot like me, that have come to realization of what reality is in many areas and on different planes. Well, Singlob lost his career. He had criticized the policies of the Democratic Party when it came to national defense. And he was a man that was very much in touch with the reality of the nature of man and evil. He understood it. He had been involved in butting heads with it all his life. Well, we're at risk all day, every day, everywhere. And if God does not protect us in the middle of the madness of mere mortals holding the levers of power, we're not going to be protected because men don't have enough brains to do it. Question number 15. Cannot all forms of government raise armies and resist an evil man? Cannot men get together and raise an army or a militia and resist evil men? Answer: this has sometimes been done. And after much bloodshed and confusion, the people have partially succeeded. But they have much more frequently failed. And then they were more oppressed than before. We're going to end here with this. What's he saying? He's saying there, as the Bible says, this is a Bible phrase out of the old King Jimmy's version, their latter state was worse than their former. When you grab your pitchforks and say, we're going to storm the Bastille, as they did in France, you're just going to get slaughtered. Because they got professional military forces. They got aircraft carriers. They've got fighter jets and bombers. And a militia is not going to change that. I'm discouraged when I see people forming militias, what they call militias, and they're in command of them. It won't work. I understand the sentiment. They're sick of the stupidity. But remember this, too. There are a lot of arrogant people out there in the patriot community that will do those kind of things because they want to be in charge and they want everybody to look up to them. Lots of people like that. They want the glory. They will be slaughtered, too. You see examples of this in the gospel records during the trial of Jesus Christ. The people that are trying him, including the leaders of Babylonian Judaism, are discussing and recounting these kind of rebellions of militiamen that have come up recently among them. And what happened to all the people that did that? They were slaughtered. What happened to the Fifth Monarchy movement in England back during the Reformation in the 1600s? They were slaughtered on the streets of London. What happened to the Peasants' Revolt of about 1380 in England? They were slaughtered too. They had very influential leaders. They tried to organize people. They were slaughtered. What happened to that movement in Saxony during the Reformation? They were slaughtered too. What happened to the students in Tiananmen Square in China decades ago when they wanted freedom? The students, what happened to them? They were slaughtered. My friends, we're here because I don't want you to be slaughtered. I want you to win. And the only way you're going to win, only way our country is going to win is if we do it the way God says do it. Not try to achieve the result he says to achieve. If you don't try to do it his way, you're going to get slaughtered. What is his way? His path, his progress, the progress for his pilgrims. We call it, our common law calls it due process. In fact, that's what our common law is, due process. The way. Jesus Christ said, he didn't say I'm the law. He didn't say I'm a list of laws. What did he say? John 14:6. He said, I am the way. That word way, odos, in the Greek tongue, means roadway, wagon road with two wheel tracks. That's what the word means. Get on it. Do it his way. Don't be like Frankie Sinatra. I did it my way. No. You get slaughtered. Remember that famous song? That's the evil empire, to think that way. That's the wrong way. There are many ways, says the Proverbs in the Bible. There are many ways that seem right unto a man. But the end, singular, is death. Jesus Christ said, I am the way. No man, he says, comes to the Father, God the Father, no man comes to him except he come through me. The way. It's not what you want to do or what you think God wants you to do. It's how you approach him, because he's the one that's going to accomplish it through you. How do you approach him? You approach him the right way. With all respect, with your hat in your hand. That's the 15th out of 333.